We are here to talk about data privacy and consumer protection. Now, interesting thing, and all of us have observed this during the weekend, that this has been talked about a heck of a lot. We had originally set up this panel with a view to it not being talked about very much, and that's how we'll run it in terms of questions and answers. But given that it's been a key theme throughout the weekend, we're going to make this a lot more interactive and use it to, I guess, consolidate some of the thinking and some of the thoughts and ideas and challenges that have been presented to us. So, as we get into this, I will introduce the panel here. I will start at the left-hand side, and for those keen-eyed among you, David Tripe has metamorphosised. The caterpillar has turned into a butterfly. Unfortunately, David was stuck in Wellington due to flight cancellations and then delays. Apparently, the poor guy has literally just landed at Auckland Airport. It's a little unfortunate. And especially given Joni's call out this morning to involve academia. David is a professor of economics at Massey University. It is a bit sad that he's not here, but we do have a more than able and more than capable alternate in Joni. Next along this, we have Nicola Sladden. Nicola is the banking ombudsman, and she's been doing that since 2015 and a deputy before that. She says, according to her profile, she's been in dispute resolution for 20 years, which is pretty impressive. But I want to know what the dispute is. That's a flippin' long dispute. And she brings very much a consumer perspective to what we're talking about, which is a very important voice in it. Next, we have Graeme Pyper. Graeme, and now I need to read out his title because it's pretty impressive. He is the Director of Gemalto, Regional Director for Gemalto for Enterprise and Cybersecurity. That's a great title.
It is.
I love it.
I love it.
Did you pick it yourself?
I wish.
Okay. It was bestowed upon you.
It was.
Even better. Graeme is also a veteran of the industry, despite his youthful good looks. He's been doing this sort of work for 20 plus years as well. Throughout here as well as Europe. And funnily enough, Jackie, who's next on the list, the two of these have both spent some time in Warsaw plying their trade and doing their work, which is an interesting reflection for both of them, talking about how nice it was. We need to go.
Yep.
Next we have Jackie Fitzpatrick, who is the Managing Director for G&D, and she's been involved in solution delivery for roughly the same period of time as the rest of the people we're talking about here on the board. So Gemalto and G&D both are solution providers in the security, integrity, data management space, and very much Jackie's role is finding the solutions which fit the industry as well as the population as well. What we're going to do to kick off is we talked a lot, there was a lot of talk about collaboration and how we need to come together as an industry to address this issue of data privacy and consumer protection. So I'm going to get everybody on the panel just to give us a wee snapshot of, given their position, what they see their role is. So let's start, Jackie, with you.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, essentially our role is simple in some ways. It's two key elements. It's the security partner, so it's ensuring that all this complex environment that we're trying to make very simple to our customers is well and truly managed and infallible for as much of the cause as we all endeavour it to be. And second to that we're a technology enabler. So this journey gets very rich from both the onboarding experience of an identity through to the way that you provision it, manage it, use it, and even decommission it. So our role is to essentially support, whether it's banks, telecoms, enterprise, government, to ensure that that identity management journey is safe from end to end.
Perfect. Thank you. Graeme.
So from a Gemalto perspective, we're very much involved in in the ID space as well. So we very heavily involved in making sure that customers can actually authenticate themselves to the information that they need to have access. But predominantly what we've seen over the last 12 months and longer is a proliferation of data that's escaping the enterprise. So how do you actually protect that information? How is it locked down? How do you actually look after that in a world where you're, if I quote the sort of the connection theme for this conference, in all of these different connected areas, how do you actually protect that information? And that's really where we're sitting right now.
Great. Nicola.
Well, look, as Andrew said, I'm the banking ombudsman, and we're a free and independent dispute resolution service. We're here to assist, resolve, and ideally prevent banking problems between banks and their customers. And we think that a really robust and credible dispute resolution service is a critical part of a well-functioning society and economy. You talked about, how could I deal with complaints for 20 years? I believe they're toxic. It's toxic treasure. There's a lot of value in complaints. It's a part of that consumer voice. And in terms of what we've been seeing lately, we've seen a lot of fraud cases. So we don't want to simply resolve those individual disputes, but also feed the insights and share the learnings back into the sector and back into the community so that people can manage their finances more safely and more effectively. So we believe that we can play a key role in also supporting financial capability. So people do, the consumers do engage with confidence in the sector.
Awesome. And Joni, we will get you to comment, perhaps along the basis of Canada first, not Canada only.
Yeah, for sure. So and that's, that is being global is being is what you need to be today. And so what we provide as the DIAC is the self-governing organization that facilitates the collaboration. So we are the neutral convener of the collaboration space to help organize the market forces of Canada to deliver on the vision. We are the representation, the singular representation of the vision. And, not quite the ombudsman, but we play referee from time to time. So collaboration across sectors, across industries requires careful curation, and it requires neutral, trusted parties to help facilitate that. And so that's what we do.
Thank you. One area I'm conscious we haven't gone into a whole lot of technical depth on is the solutions, is how we make this stuff bulletproof or secure. So I do want to ask the two panellists closest to me what they're saying in terms of the problems that you're being asked to solve and how you're going about solving them. So Jackie, maybe we start with you.
Well, in terms of solving it, and actually for both Graeme and I, we've been doing this for a very long time. Where the SIM card in your mobile phone, where the banking card in your wallet, where your identity card, your passport. So there's a long history, even right back to the production of cash. So in terms of the security understanding and the credential management, this is essentially our DNA. But in terms of the journey forward, it obviously gets much richer and it gets, yes, more complicated. But in terms of the security elements, we are now looking at what really is a mobile-driven and highly, as we know, digital environment. So things such as how you authenticate, the levels of encryption. Encryption that has existed today, as you know it, on a smart card now goes much further. The way it obviously connects into the mobile phone, the device, and we're not just talking traditional devices anymore, we are talking a lot of foreign entrants and new devices. So this whole IoT connected world will bring security very much to the highest level of thinking for all of the organisations in this room, whether you're a bank or otherwise. So gone are the years where security was looked at as an afterthought. It's very much security by design. It's right up front, and you need that inside knowledge into how you authenticate, essentially the encryption requirements, the post-event activity, and all the other activities in the market that you've got to consider when you're engaging, whether it's your fridge, buying your milk, through to buying online and onboarding new customers for identity. So it's all about ensuring that there is those basics of security expanded into this much more, richer environment that we're in.
Perfect. Thank you. Graeme.
Well, I think Jacqueline's just stolen my whole pitch, so that's fine. I think from a Gemalto perspective, I think if I look back where over the last sort of 10, 15 years, the banking kind of industry has been relatively moving on a quite nice, even kind of paced journey.
Not always, but
Things haven't really changed that much internally, right? There's a lot of things happening now. There's a lot of things happening over the last 3 or 4 years. And now the internal workings of the banks are having to really change, to adapt and move pretty quickly. Now, with that becomes an issue with legacy and how do you protect information that's locked away in legacy kind of environments, and then how do you leverage the agility that other environments such as cloud, AWS, Azure, Ali Cloud, Google Cloud, whatever cloud, how do you leverage all of those and actually make sure that the information is still locked away so that you can give your customers the ability and the trust assurance that it is actually locked away. And it's that, and I think from a consumer perspective, I'm starting to see more and more people who are taking a greater degree of interest in the level of trust with the organizations that they're actually dealing with. An example was I was on holiday earlier this year, and I was in a pool having a beer, and there was a young couple from the US, both under 25, and we were talking about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. And the guys turned around and said, well, 1 in 5 of under 25s in the US are now moving off Facebook because they don't trust them. So it's starting to change.
Cool, thank you. Nicola, I wonder if we can ask you, from your perspective and the traffic that you hear, the people, the real humans that you get on the phone talking with you about their challenges and problems, what are you seeing as this? Obviously the pace of technology and change is happening rapidly. What sort of themes are you seeing based on the problems that customers are having?
yeah, well, I mean, certainly the payments ecosystem is rapidly changing, and there's a whole lot of exciting benefits and opportunities that will arise from that, and the idea of greater convenience, frictionless transactions and the like. But I'm really conscious that there are still a lot of consumers that are left behind from even the current systems, and how important it is to ensure that the customer does remain front and centre in terms of any of these solutions and isn't left behind. And I thought it was a very I guess, poignant graph that was put out this morning about the asymmetry between the development and the technological changes and human adaptability. I guess what we see is how a lot of consumers, like our parents, our colleagues, are just not keeping a pace with the rapid changes, and how we all have a role to continue to educate and ensure that we connect and engage effectively for the consumers, because ultimately it is about reaping benefits for consumers, and to do that we need to ensure that they trust and have confidence in the products and services we're offering. And so that's about ensuring that they have control and give informed consent, and that's true consent, that's freely given, it's informed, it's specific and it's unambiguous, and it's also ensuring that there is some accountability or framework if things go wrong, because things always will go wrong. Data breaches will happen, and I'm just conscious that it's that we have a really clear and robust framework so that customers aren't left trying to navigate what may be quite a complex web of multiple parties moving into the future.
Cool, that's good. Joni, I'm wondering, just picking up on the people potentially getting left behind from a technology and from an education perspective, who are in some ways are going to have no choice. They are going to be utilising the technology that's placed in front of them. It's the only way they're going to need to do business. You identified education as one of your key components, one of the 3 elements that you're focusing on. Have you had a look at this point, understanding it's still emerging, at the the late adopters?
Yeah, so you have to consider the whole population, and so that we have a very digital population in Canada, so that's a good thing. We also have an environment of our payment network. Interac is one of the most trusted brands in Canada. Our banks are very trusted in general by our citizens, and our government is very trusted. And so when you think about innovating, that can be pretty scary when everybody's already trusted, and then you have a lot to lose. And so that's definitely something that we consider. We also think about the we talk about things like could we use new technologies, let's say the family of blockchain or something like that? Could we use these technologies or these identity technologies for voting? Everybody's curious about e-voting, for example. And that's also a scary use case because people have lots of trust in that space as it is. And then right away, the next thing we think of is, there are populations that can't leave their house so easily. And so, while we're looking at maybe how can we do things for the masses, we might want to change our focus a little bit to how can we help the people that are maybe natural adopters, early adopters of these kinds of technologies that would otherwise be left behind without those technologies. So we're always going to have the last resort in person. We're always going to have the phone and the ways to do things for those who aren't on pace. But we can also think about who are the populations that might really benefit from these new technologies and be very happy to test them out and join the community.
Cool. That's a good perspective on it. I'm conscious of opening up for questions from the audience, because I'm sure there's been a lot as you've gone through the weekend that burning questions or ideas or challenges or where to start. So we've got a mic at the back. Do I say I see that hand? Yes, Helen.
Is that on? Oh, yes, it is. I'm Helen, I'm from the BNZ. Just a question to all the panel, actually, and just picking up on this last topic around informed consent. We are all, I think, pretty familiar with certainly bank terms and conditions, which are not necessarily very friendly. And, I'm sure a lot of people have signed away on many things without actually reading the details. We go into the online world and we're looking at our Facebook terms and conditions and all of these others. Now, often these are used as ways to protect the company. They're not really there to protect the consumer. How do we change that around so that there is a good framework for actual informed consent by consumers?
Great question. Who wants to go first?
I have some thoughts on that.
Go for it.
So there is some standards work that's happening around consent. We like to call consent the biggest lie. Does anyone read them? There's always one in every crowd. So it's the biggest lie. Nobody reads them. There are bodies that are working on things like a consent receipt. We don't have a way to kind of track that and manage that over time, and it is written to protect the company more so than it's written, for our consumption. There's also a bit of a paradox in there, because if we're tracking consent, so think about something like a smart space. If you walk into a smart space and we've written privacy rules to say you have to notify me before you track me in this smart space. Okay, well, now you've notified me and you have to prove that I said no to being tracked in the smart space, so you've basically created a record that I was in the smart space to begin with. So there are lots of paradoxes wrapped in with consent, but using cryptography, using newer technologies, there are standards, methodologies coming forward for how to have consent receipts, just like we have receipts for things that we purchase, how to have digitally, cryptographically protected receipts for our consent, such that we can then actually have a record that's only accessible to us, and then we can actually do something really amazing, which is revocation, because we never can revoke our consent today. We say yes to everything and we say yes to it forever. So, not only do we need to have the right level of information, which may be different depending on who you are, we need to do that on a open standards basis, and we have to make sure that people can then do revocation of that consent when they decide that that's what they want to do. And this work is happening, so it's coming.
Well, there's significant support in terms of the schemes play in this, where credential management will become your responsibility, our responsibility. It has got to be the empowered consumer, so that all the blame, liability in that turn doesn't just sit on the industry. I mean, we are industry players here. We need to be mindful that the consumer needs to take some responsibility. So in terms of revocation, if you have that ability to manage all your credentials wherever they live, essentially within your control, you're essentially empowered to have that consent and manage it appropriately. Not to say that there isn't an obligation on us as institutions to do that properly, but as a consumer, you absolutely will have the power to do it from a technology enablement perspective.
Yeah, I wonder how many of you have read the terms and conditions that you check and tick on a daily basis. I don't think it's, I don't think society will continue to consider that as an informed choice or informed consent. A catch-all tick box approach, I think, is something that we need to reconsider. I think having consent bundled in the terms and conditions in the fine print will no longer be acceptable from our community. I'd be interested in other people's views on that. To me, that isn't a truly informed choice.
Wouldn't that be a fun place for AI? Read all the consent forms for me and tell me what I should agree
Yeah,
on?
I think from what I see in the banking sector, there's a real drive to ensure that information is provided in plain English, that it's understandable, and so that people truly do know what they are agreeing to, how the information is going to be used and secured. But
Cool.
I'd be interested in others' views.
I think from when you're looking at sort of the open APIs, open connections that we're making to third parties, that's going to just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow over time. So is that right for us to have to manage our privacy and our rights for all of those? That's going to be really, really difficult, right? Equally so, I want to be able to know who I'm actually having an interaction with through that third-party arrangement, because it's not going to be just one hop, it's going to be multiple hops, right? How do I monitor that? But more importantly, if I lose the trust of one of them, how do I then enforce the first hop to stop sharing my information with them, right? That to me is one of the first things that we need to get absolutely right, is the control of my information or your information to somebody else when they've actually had some kind of incident.
And this comes back to the governance point you were raising in your session, Joni, because that's not a simple problem.
No.
And that's a multi-party problem as well, right? That's big.